Thank you for joining me for this episode of the PS We Expire podcast. I am your host, Morgan Motzinger, and today we are talking about the lies that we tell ourselves, the lies that we tell other people, and not so much the lies that we tell consciously, but the lies that we tell unconsciously, the lies that we tell as a result of what we learned in childhood about belonging and staying safe. And all of this ties into a conversation about what real, true authenticity is, and letting what we feel on the inside match our behavior, our conversations, our truth-telling on the outside. So before we get into the episode, I want to invite you to download the free ebook, Know Thyself. So I am a personality test junkie. I absolutely love taking personality tests and learning more about my strengths. I love all sorts of things on the spectrum, from, some of the business strengths and skills all the way to astrology. So in this free ebook, I'm sharing with you my 3 favorite personality profiling tools and a little workbook where you get to take notes on what resonates with you. So tying that into this conversation today about authenticity is that many times if we don't slow down to ask ourselves the questions about what we really care about, how we are deeply wired, what our deep values are, that we can move through life in a very unconscious way and not even recognize that we're not living in integrity with who we really are. So this is just a nice little tool to help you slow down, read some things that resonate with you, and have a big old permission slip for you to be exactly who you are. So the link for that is in the show notes. Highly recommend just download this free ebook and work through it at your own pace and get to know yourself even more. Okay, on to the episode. When I was in junior high, so 12, 13, my parents were pretty strict about curfews, about boys. We did have quite a lot of freedom, though. I mean, this was in the 90s, and so there wasn't a lot of oversight on our day-to-day activities. But I do remember I consistently ran late. I would be, at a friend's house, and I would lose track of time, and I would get home and I would get in trouble because I would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes late pretty consistently. And so my parents started to really crack down on that and have some dire consequences for being late. So I, in my sneaky little preteen self, came up with a brilliant plan. One of the ways that my parents tried to make sure that I was on time is by putting a digital watch on the handlebars of my bike, because I, biked everywhere, biked down to my friend's house. We rode our bikes all over the neighborhood. So I had this digital watch on the handlebars of my bike, and that was supposed to be my, accountability clock to be home on time. So my scheming self came up with this brilliant plan that if I was running late, I would just set the time back. I would adjust the time on my watch so that I showed up 1 or 2 minutes early. Mom, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure I've already told you this, whatever. But that was one of the ways that I told lies to keep myself safe from being punished, to keep myself from getting in trouble. And I have often thought over the years, especially into adulthood now with, have my own kids, and I have thought about the ways that we lie, the lies that we tell in order to keep our belonging, in order to keep ourselves as part of the group, in a way to not be able to be punished, as a way to cope with feeling like we will be a disappointment if we tell the truth. And it hasn't been until the last handful of years that I started to turn the gaze inward and understand that not only are we doing that externally, but often we tell ourselves lies to keep ourselves part of the group, part of, making sure that we belong, making sure that we don't ruffle any feathers. So we often will tell ourselves lies to keep ourselves safe. This is a brilliant coping strategy that we came up with as children, that we were able to look at our environment around us and notice areas where there could be behaviors or there could be choices that would threaten our survival. So in our child minds, we recognize that we have to depend on other people in order to get the food that we need, in order to get the emotional connection that we need, in order to be safe. And so we come up with so many coping strategies and ways to keep ourselves safe. And most people move into adulthood never revisiting the ways that we were programmed as children. And I'm talking about it in a way where it sounds like it's a conscious decision as a child to lie in order to, avoid being kicked out of my family or whatever. But these aren't conscious choices when we're kids. These are ways that we just naturally come by making sure that we will always belong. So we sacrifice our authenticity from the time that we're tiny to make sure that we survive. And it's not until we get to be adults that we start to ask the questions about, what is this self-abandonment costing me, really? What is it doing to my relationships when I am not telling the truth all the way? So I want to talk today about how we often lie in big ways or small with our yeses when we want to say no. How we lie about who we are in order to fit in. How we don't tell the truth about how we really feel because we are operating from this old programming that says that if the other person doesn't accept you, that is death, that equates to being alone forever and dying. I remember one of the other instances specifically where I was trying this little workaround so I wouldn't get in trouble. It was the summer between 9th and 10th grade, and I was at my friend Kelsey's house, and we lived like, I don't know, 5 blocks or something from the junior high school, and she lived just beyond that. And so I was down at her house and we were hanging out with boys, which was not allowed. My parents didn't allow that. And my brand new boyfriend, Adam, and he was, I knew that I was late, but that was fine. I was, walking with my bike with my stopwatch on the handlebars up past the junior high and was saying goodbye to him in the parking lot. And we were hugging and kissing. And I see headlights come into the little drop-off turnaround, and I realized, oh shit, that's my mom. And I got on my bike and I pedaled so fast to get home. I thought maybe I'll beat her home and then she won't notice that I'm late, and that maybe, fingers crossed, she didn't see me making out with my boyfriend that I wasn't supposed to have. Anyway, so I got home, and of course I was like filled with terror and dread. And my mom asked me about that boy that I was with, and it looked like you were getting pretty snuggly. And I straight up lied and said, oh, that's just my friend. That's just my friend Adam. We were just hanging out and he was kind of walking me home. And no, we were just hugging. I was just hugging him goodbye. And sometimes I wonder if my parents actually believed me, or if they just thought they wanted to believe me, and so they did, even though they didn't. I don't really know. I don't know how I got away with that kind of stuff when I was a kid. I must have just had a really good poker face. I don't anymore. I am a terrible liar because I have found it to be unbearable to have what I'm behaving like on the outside not match what's on the inside. There have been a lot of challenges in overcoming self-abandonment. There have been a lot of really hard-won skills that I have developed as I have allowed myself to live in incongruence, so that I have allowed what I'm saying and how I'm behaving on the outside to match what's going on the inside. So back to my question about how often do we lie in big or small ways with our yeses when we want to say no? Some of the ways that you might be experiencing this in your life could be things like if you are a business owner and people want free or discounted services, and you can't handle how it feels on the inside to tell someone no. So you say yes. And I know, because I have navigated this myself, I know what that feels like when you say yes to giving discounted services or free things and you don't actually want to. A byproduct of that is resentment, is oftentimes that we, feel like shit about ourselves, but we also feel really unkind things towards the other people that ended up getting it discounted or free, even though it's not their fault that you said yes when you wanted to say no. Another way that many women, I think in particular, I mean, I guess I couldn't say this definitively because I haven't spoken with men about this, but in your intimate partnerships, when there's a bid for sex and you don't want to, but you say yes anyway because you want to keep the peace or because you are driven by what you feel like your duty is, or, any number of things, what you feel like being a good wife and partner is, what your role, how your role is defined in that. So you say yes, even though you want to say no. Even if in your outward behavior, you're giving all the signals that you're saying yes, if on the inside you are saying no, you are not being authentic to your own needs. Another way would be, something as like classically textbook as being at a family gathering and someone tells an offensive joke or starts to talk about something that is not right, that doesn't sit well with you, that doesn't align with your deepest held values. And you don't say anything, you just kind of smile and nod along, or you ignore and block it out as much as possible. I didn't write this quote, but I saw it this morning and I thought this really gets down to the reason why we cannot continue to live in this way, is that if you stay silent about the problem to keep the peace, and I'm going to throw in there, in order to belong. So if you stay silent about the problem to keep the peace or continue to belong, there is 0% chance that the problem gets fixed. 0% problem that 0% chance that the problem gets fixed. Think about that. If you don't tell the truth about how you really feel, nothing will change. The business deals will not improve. You will continue to have resentment in your business towards your customers and clients. You will continue to have resentment or walls built up in your relationships because you're not telling the truth about not wanting to have sex. You will continue to feel this like internal ick when you know that you have things that you want to say, things that are important to you that you don't say. The truth is that women in particular have been trained to keep the peace. We have been trained that other people's emotions are our responsibility. And so we do these, like these back bends, and when we contort ourselves into positions where we are always trying to make sure that everybody is okay, and we're moving the pieces to make sure that nobody has their emotional life disrupted by anything that we say or anything that we feel. We're constantly placating and keeping the peace at the expense of our internal peace. In order to break these habits of not telling the truth, we have to become adept. We have to develop the skill of learning to sit with discomfort. We have to learn how to be okay with the internal that happens when we start telling the truth. Because many times we cannot anticipate how what we say is going to be responded to. We can't anticipate if we're going to be rejected. We can't anticipate if the other person is going to really dislike it, or, break off a contract or break off a relationship, or, not invite you anymore to family gatherings. We can't anticipate how that's going to be received. And oftentimes we focus and we fixate on the possibility of the difficult thing happening and not recognizing that that is the cost to true deep relationships, true deep connection with other people, and true fulfillment in our, in our relationships, in our businesses, etc. That is the price to pay, is the discomfort. So we have to get really good with feeling and accepting and completely allowing the discomfort that comes with other people being unhappy with us. We have to be okay with the discomfort of letting other people find solutions to their own problems. God, this one's hard for me because I'm like, I see how I could make that better. I see how I could fix it. I see how I can blah, blah, blah. And I oftentimes will jump in when I don't need to be there to fix things. You have to let other people go through their own discomfort to find problems or find solutions to their own problems. You have to be okay with the discomfort of having difficult conversations and setting tough boundaries. This one, more than anything, I think is one of the hardest things about this, because we oftentimes, I'm sure that you have gone through this yourself when you have something difficult to say to someone and you can feel the panic rising up in your body. You can feel your throat constrict. And sometimes it's like it takes, 3, 4, 5 attempts to say it, even though you're hyping yourself up. Okay, I'm going to say it now. I'm going to say it now. And it doesn't quite get past your throat. So just knowing that it's going to suck. It's going to suck to say these things. Maybe not even because of how it's received, but just because it sucks to feel that in your body. It's not fun. But when we get familiar and okay with the discomfort that comes with the panic that arises when we say something that we have been needing to say, the more adept you are going to get at being able to say those things. So we also have to get comfortable with our own discomfort of realizing that other people's happiness is not our responsibility. Our own happiness is our responsibility. We have to be so committed to internal peace. We have to be so committed to sussing out what our deep values are. We have to become so committed to a life that is aligned that we cannot tolerate not being true, not telling the truth, not being authentic. And this is so not easy to do. There are like a billion memes out there that are like, be authentic and be your true self and all of that. And not many people are talking about how fucking difficult that is. How difficult that is to rewire the programming that is buried in some of the deepest recesses of our psyche, because they were developed in childhood, because they are born out of our evolutionary need for acceptance and belonging for our survival. This is why this is so difficult to tell the truth all the way. And this isn't, I will say this, that telling the truth doesn't mean that you then have license to be an asshole. You don't have license to tell the truth in a way that cuts other people down or hurts or maligns other people. This isn't like a get out of jail free card when I'm talking about living an authentic life. But truth, let's see here. Kindness without truth is a lie. And truth without kindness is abuse. My therapist told me that. I have been working with my therapist on this exact thing for many months now, as I have just tried to see the places where I have been so motivated to make sure that I belong, that I haven't been really saying who I am and what I need. And this is hard work. And it doesn't come out perfectly the first time. When I talked about just now about the 3, 4, 5 times when you are on the edge of telling somebody something, or on the edge of calling somebody out, or on the edge of saying something that you've been needing to say, that it can take many times to burst through that layer of resistance. So it's not that, once I have the hard conversation that like, sweet, I'm going to be so good at this now for the rest of my life. This is a lifelong journey of being able to take responsibility for your own stuff, take responsibility for the ways that you are not living authentically, and to change that. It's a lifelong skill to learn how to navigate around other people's needs as well. And at what points do you compromise, and at what points do you not compromise? Because the cost of having that, your outside, your forward facing, your persona, your ego, your identity, the cost of that not being the same as what's happening on the inside is so much internal conflict, so much internal conflict. And oftentimes we don't even recognize that internal conflict until we've kind of reached a breaking point. We get to the place where we say, I cannot continue to live life the way that I have always lived it. This is growth, my friends. This is the work of the roots that are being laid down, and then this last little push where the tiny little plant is pushing up through the soil and is touching the sun for the first time. This is difficult work, and it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of intention, and it takes a lot of clarity on your values. It takes a lot of self-love to be able to do this. And if we go into this, new frontier of telling people the truth, and if we do it haphazardly, if we do it without intention, if we do it without checking in with ourselves and lots of self-care along the way, we are going to end up burning bridges down that we didn't need to burn down. We're going to end up cutting ties when really it could have just been loosened up and untied, if that makes sense. When we go through life harming other people in order to say how we really feel, we're just going to leave a trail of destruction. We're going to leave a trail of broken relationships, and we're going to leave a trail of bitterness and resentment in ourselves in the opposite realm. So to proceed with telling the truth and bringing your inner life into alignment, or your outer life into alignment with your inner life, you have to do this mindfully. You have to do this with constant checking in with yourself, with great levels of self-awareness. And you need to develop the skills to be able to sit with a shit ton of uncomfortable emotions. And you will doubt yourself along the way. You will question whether or not it's worth it, especially if you are having some like big revelations in your life about, some significant changes in your identity or something like that. Proceed with caution and care, and lots of love directed towards yourself and others. The authentic life is so worth it. Is so worth it. If you are interested in understanding this on a whole other level, I cannot recommend the book enough, The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. She shares some of her own personal story, but then also takes you through, every chapter has little exercises to do so that you can check in with yourself and see in what areas you are abandoning yourself, in what areas you are not living in alignment, in what areas of your life you are not telling the truth. And every time I talk about not telling the truth, again, it's not that many times we are consciously doing that. I wouldn't say that people who are not living in alignment are, what's the word I'm looking for? Pathological liars. We're not pathological liars when we're not living authentically. This is the hard work of redoing some really deeply grooved neural pathways. So please do not introduce shame into this conversation when you are recognizing and allowing and maybe investigating for the first time areas of your life where you haven't been telling the truth. Shame cannot have a place at the table here. Self-love only can have a place at the table. And a compassion for our younger selves who develop these skills in order to stay safe. So that's all I have for you today. Lean into the discomfort. Spend some time thinking about the ways that you have been abandoning yourself or neglecting yourself or silencing yourself, the ways that you have shushed your little inner voice or your intuition, maybe for a really long time. And it takes time for that inner voice, that small voice, to get bigger. It takes time for that, because if we have a habit over years or decades of shh, 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 it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And it takes time to rebuild that trust for that little voice to get louder and louder and louder. But as you listen and as you shift your behavior to align with what that little voice is telling you, the more in tune, in touch, and in love you are going to be with this journey. So before we go, P.S.